The roar of the gym was supposed to be his kingdom. But tonight, when he reached for the hand that meant everything to him, silence cut sharper than any buzzer. Not applause, not cheers, just that cruel, suffocating quiet that told him he had crossed a line invisible but unforgiving. Darius Johnson, the golden boy of Lincoln High basketball, was used to pressure. He had handled hostile crowds, last-second shots, and the weight of a whole school's expectations. But this was different. This was the moment the crowd decided he was no longer theirs. He hadn't planned it. Maybe part of him had. When his team won the regional semifinal, adrenaline pumped through every vein, the crowd exploded, and he turned to the one person who had held him steady through late-night practices, whispered encouragements after bruising losses, and quiet laughs when the world felt too heavy. Mateo Alvarez, the new shooting guard with freckles and a quiet smile that could disarm any storm. Darius pulled him close, kissed him, not a long kiss, not something he thought about, just a kiss of pure joy, raw, unfiltered truth. And then it happened. The cheer collapsed. The faces shifted. Friends he'd sweated with for years froze. Coach Miller's jaw locked tight. Even Mateo's smile faltered as if the warmth had been stolen from the gym by a shadow only they could feel. Someone coughed. Someone muttered. Then came the first whisper. What the hell was that? Darius could still hear the thud of the basketball echoing across the floor, abandoned where it had rolled. The gym, moments before filled with triumph, now felt like an execution ground. At home that night, his father sat at the kitchen table, nursing a mug of coffee like it was stronger than it was. The man's hands were rough from decades of driving trucks, hauling loads across state lines, carrying a silence that sometimes felt heavier than cargo. He had raised Darius alone after Darius's mother left, and though words didn't come easy to him, love always died in his sacrifices, in his constant presence. But tonight, his silence was different. You know what you did tonight, his father said finally, voice gravelly, not from anger but from the weight of the world pressing down. Darius swallowed. Yeah, I do. The man's eyes, tired but steady, studied his son. You proud of it? A pause. Then firm. Yes. The silence stretched again, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was full of something else, understanding, maybe even pride. His father leaned back, nodding slowly. Then I guess that's what matters. But son, his voice cracked slightly. You know they ain't gonna make it easy for you. Or me. The next day at school, the whispers had turned into stares. Locker doors slammed louder than usual. Some of his teammates walked past him without a word, their shoulders brushing him like he wasn't even there. Coach Miller called him into his office, his walls decorated with championship photos, trophies gleaming as if mocking the boy who had thought he belonged here. Darius, Coach said, his voice cold, clipped. You're a great player. But what you did publicly, it's a distraction. The team needs focus, not controversy. You mean not me? Darius shot back. His voice was calm, but his fists curled at his sides. Coach sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. I mean, I can't have this turning the whole season into a circus. People are already talking. Parents are calling. You put me in a tough spot. I didn't put you anywhere, Darius said. I played my game. I won us that game. And he stopped, breathing hard. I didn't do anything wrong. But he could see in Coach's eyes that the verdict was already in. He wasn't just the star player anymore. He was the problem. Mateo, meanwhile, had disappeared into silence. He avoided Darius in the halls, his freckled face pale, his hazel eyes avoiding contact. When they finally spoke under the bleachers after practice, Mateo's voice trembled. My parents saw the video. They said I can't see you anymore. That I have to quit the team if I don't. If I don't end this. The words cut deeper than any rejection from the team. Darius wanted to scream, to shake him, to beg. But instead, he just whispered, And what do you want, Mateo? Mateo's lips trembled. I want you. But I don't know if I'm strong enough. The weight of centuries seemed to fall on Darius's shoulders, then not just his love, but the history of being a black boy in a town that tolerated him only as long as he gave them something to cheer for. He wasn't supposed to be too loud, too proud, too different. And now he was all of those things at once. That night, his father came home to find protest signs planted in their yard. Slurs painted on cardboard, one of them nailed to their fence. He ripped them down with shaking hands, his face hardening with each one. When Darius came out to help, his father grabbed his shoulder. Son, They don't get to decide who you are. They don't get to take this from you. But what if they already have? Darius's voice cracked. His father looked at him, fierce and unyielding. Then we take it back. And just like that, the battle lines were drawn not just for basketball, not just for love, but for dignity, for survival, for the right to exist as himself. The next morning the world seemed smaller, like the walls of Lincoln High were leaning in on him. Darius walked down the hallway, and every step echoed too loud, too exposed. He could feel the eyes. Some kids smirked, others whispered behind palms that didn't hide their contempt. A few faces looked away, guilty but silent. Silence hurt more than the slurs. At his locker, he found a note shoved through the vents. He pulled it out, unfolded it. Just one word, scribbled in black marker. Freak. He crushed it in his hand, heart pounding. He wasn't sure if he wanted to scream or cry. He shoved the paper deep into his backpack and slammed the locker shut. Hey, a voice said quietly. Darius turned to see Maya, his lab partner from chemistry. A Latina girl with sharp eyes. She wasn't the type to sugarcoat. Ignore them. They're cowards. He tried to force a smile. Easy for you to say. No, she said, meeting his gaze firmly. Not easy. But you've got guts, D. More than anyone in this hallway. The kindness caught him off guard. For a moment, he felt like maybe the whole world hadn't turned its back. But practice that afternoon was a different battlefield. The air was thick with tension when he walked into the gym. Teammates stretched, avoided eye contact. The sound of sneakers squeaking on polished wood felt hostile. When drills started, no one passed him the ball. When they ran plays, they cut him out like he didn't exist. Finally, he snapped. You got a problem with me, just say it. Silence. Then Jamal, his best friend since freshman year, muttered, Man, you know what you did. You put us all in the middle of your thing. My thing. Darius shot back. You mean my life? My love. Jamal shook his head, eyes filled with something between anger and fear. You could have kept it private. Why do you have to put it out there like that? Because I'm not ashamed, Darius said. His voice carried across the court, defiant. And I shouldn't have to be. Coach Miller blew the whistle, cutting through the tension. That's enough. Everyone back in line. But Darius could feel an invisible wall between him and the team. It wasn't just about basketball anymore. It was about belonging, about identity, about whether he was still allowed to wear that jersey and claim the court as his own. That night, when he got home, he found his father at the kitchen table again, papers spread out. Not bills this time, but something else. Flyers, community notices, news articles. They're talking about you, son, his father said, tapping the paper. The town council's holding a meeting. People are stirring things up, saying you're a bad influence, saying you're bringing shame on the school. Darius felt the air leave his lungs. Because I kissed someone I love. Because they're scared, his father said simply. His rough hands folded the paper in half, then in half again, as if he could crush the hate by sheer force. But scared people can be dangerous. We have to be ready. Ready for what? Darius asked, though he already knew. Ready to fight, his father said. His eyes were steel. Not with fists. With truth. With standing tall, no matter what they throw. The next days blurred into a storm. The video of the kiss spread online. Some called it beautiful, a moment of bravery. Others called it disgusting. Social media burned with opinions, most of them from people who had never spoken to him, who knew nothing about his heart or his struggles. His phone buzzed constantly, some messages of support, many more filled with venom. Mateo, meanwhile, grew more distant. When they did talk, it was always in whispers, always looking over shoulders. My parents said they'll pull me out of school if I don't cut ties, he admitted one evening, his voice breaking. They've already started talking about moving back to Texas. The fear in his eyes hurt worse than any insult hurled at Darius. He wanted to protect him, to hold him, to promise it would all be okay. But how could he promise something when every day the walls felt like they were closing in? Then came the town meeting. The gymnasium that had once been his sanctuary now hosted rows of folding chairs filled with parents, teachers, neighbors. The air buzzed with tension. On the stage, the principal sat stiffly beside Coach Miller and a few school board members. Darius sat with his father in the back row, heart pounding. He could hear the words being thrown around like weapons. Morality, tradition, role model. Each word cut deep, not because they were true, but because they carried the weight of authority, of history. Finally, Someone stood up and said it plain. That boy is supposed to represent our school. And what he did kissing another boy in front of every knee, it's a disgrace. He doesn't deserve to wear our colors. Gasps, murmurs. Some nods, some frowns. Before Darius could even think, his father was on his feet. My boy worked harder than anyone out there, he thundered, his voice filling the gym. He bled for this team. He carried this school on his back. And now you want to throw him out because he loves different than you? Shame on you. The room erupted, some clapping, some shouting. Darius's chest tightened. He had never seen his father so fierce, so unyielding. For the first time in days, he felt something like hope. But the battle was far from over. The board announced they would review the situation, which meant uncertainty, which meant the whispers would only grow louder. At school, tensions reached a boiling point. One afternoon, as Darius walked to his car, he found his tires slashed, spray painted across the side of the vehicle. Queer. His hands shook as he stared at it. The humiliation, the anger, the helplessness, it all crashed over him at once. When he got home, his father was already waiting. "We'll fix it," he said, pulling him into a hug so tight it almost hurt. "They can break glass, they can spill paint, but they can't touch your soul. Remember that." That night, unable to sleep, Darius sat on his bed scrolling through his phone. Amid the hate, he found messages from strangers across the country. "Saw your video. You're brave. Don't let them win. You give me hope." For every cruel word, there was a spark of light. It wasn't balanced, it wasn't even close, but it was something. And then, one message that stopped him cold. "I go to your school. I'm like you. I'm scared. But seeing you makes me think maybe I don't have to hide forever." Darius stared at the screen until tears blurred his vision. For the first time, he realized this wasn't just his fight. He was carrying something bigger than himself, bigger than basketball, bigger than even love. He was carrying a chance for someone else to breathe freely. The next morning, he walked into school with his head a little higher. The whispers were still there, the stares still sharp. But he wasn't walking for them anymore. He was walking for the kid who had messaged him. For Mateo, even if fear held him back. For anyone who had ever felt small and unseen. He didn't know how the season would end. He didn't know if he'd ever wear the jersey again, or if his name would be cheered in that gym. But he knew this. He wasn't going to disappear. He wasn't going to shrink. Because his love wasn't a mistake. And no one could take that truth away. The days that followed felt like walking through fire. Every glance in the hallway, every slammed locker, every whispered insult was another spark threatening to ignite him. Darius could feel himself hardening, his heart building walls of steel. Yet, inside, a storm raged. He kept replaying the kiss, not with regret, but with longing. Mateo's face lit with joy for that fleeting moment, before fear swept it away. That was what he held on to, the truth of love, raw and undeniable. But truth was a dangerous weapon in Lincoln. By Friday, the team was scheduled for a critical game. Darius arrived at the gym only to find his name missing from the lineup. He stormed into Coach Miller's office, the smell of sweat and old leather thick in the air. "You benched me," he demanded. Coach didn't look up from his clipboard. "It's best for the team." "The team?" Darius's voice cracked. "Or your reputation?" Coach's jaw tightened. "This isn't about me. It's about keeping focus. There's too much noise around you right now." Darius leaned across the desk, eyes blazing. "There's noise because people like you won't stand up and say I belong. You'd rather let them tear me down than risk your own comfort." The words hung heavy. For a flicker of a second, Coach's eyes softened, as if he wanted to say something else. But then his face hardened. "Go home, Darius." Walking out of that office felt like exile. The sounds of bouncing balls and sneakers squeaking mocked him. He sat in the bleachers, fists clenched, watching his teammates warm up without him. He was the star, the one who carried them, and now he was invisible. That night, his father found him sitting on the porch steps, staring into the dark. "They benched you." "Yeah." His father sat down beside him, the wood creaking under his weight. For a while, they said nothing. The night hummed with crickets and distant traffic. Finally, his father spoke. "You know, when I was your age, they told me I'd never be more than a truck driver's son. They told me doors would always be closed. And most of the time, they were right. But I kept walking anyway. Because sometimes, just walking forward is its own kind of victory." Darius's throat tightened. "But what if I lose everything? Basketball, Mateo. All of it." His father placed a heavy hand on his shoulder. "Son, You won't lose yourself. And that's the only thing that matters. The words stayed with him through the weekend. They fueled him when he returned to school on Monday, when he faced the smirks and the jeers. They fueled him when he saw Mateo in the hallway, standing with his friends but glancing at him with eyes full of apology. By Tuesday, another storm brewed. The school board announced they would decide his eligibility at the end of the week. If they ruled against him, his season and possibly his scholarship chances would vanish. Students signed it in quiet defiance, slipping pens across desks, scribbling names between classes. He deserves to play, the paper read. He deserves to be treated as human. By Wednesday, over 200 signatures covered the pages. Darius held it in his hands, stunned. It wasn't everyone, but it was enough to remind him he wasn't alone. That night, he texted Mateo, "Can we talk?" For hours, no reply. Then, finally, "Meet me at the park." Midnight. He slipped out of the house under the cover of shadows. The park was deserted, the swings swaying gently in the night breeze. Mateo stood by the basketball hoop, hoodie pulled tight, hands buried in his pockets. When their eyes met, it was like no time had passed. The longing, the ache, the connection, it was all still there. "I'm sorry," Mateo whispered. His voice broke. "I'm so scared." Darius stepped closer. "I know, but we can't keep hiding. They want us to hate ourselves. They want us to disappear. But I can't do that. Not anymore." Tears glistened in Mateo's hazel eyes. "My parents said if I don't cut ties, they'll send me away. They said I'll ruin my future." "And what about your heart?" Darius asked softly. "What about the future we could have?" Mateo's breath hitched. For a moment, it felt like the world held its breath with him. Then, slowly, he reached out, fingers brushing Darius's. They stood there in the golden glow of the street lamp, hands trembling but refusing to let go. "We'll find a way," Mateo whispered, "even if it costs everything." It wasn't a promise of safety, but it was a promise of love. And that was enough for now. The next day, things escalated. During lunch, a fight broke out. A senior shoved Darius, muttering a slur. Instinct took over. Darius shoved back, fists flying before he could think. Chaos erupted, students shouting, teachers rushing in. By the time it was over, his lip was bleeding, his knuckles raw, and both boys were dragged to the principal's office. Suspension loomed over him. The principal, a man more concerned with appearances than justice, sighed heavily. "Darius, I understand you're under pressure, but violence cannot be tolerated." "He hit me first," Darius said, jaw tight. "That may be," the principal replied, "but the optics. Darius exploded. "I'm getting harassed every day, and you care about optics? About what the town thinks? What about what's right?" The principal flinched at the outburst, but said nothing. In the end, Darius walked out with a warning, the other boy with nothing. It was a reminder, the scales were not balanced. By Friday, the tension was unbearable. The school board meeting drew a crowd larger than the town parade. Reporters packed the hallway, microphones ready. Parents filled the auditorium, voices buzzing with anticipation. Darius sat beside his father, hands clenched into fists. He could feel every eye on him, every judgment, every expectation. The board chair cleared her throat. "We are here to discuss the eligibility of Darius Johnson to continue representing Lincoln High School as a member of the basketball team," she began. "Concerns have been raised regarding conduct, community standards, and the values of our school." One by one, people stood to speak. Some were harsh, calling him a disgrace, a distraction, a bad example. Others defended him, calling him brave, a role model, a beacon of truth. The room split like a wound, bleeding anger and hope in equal measure. Finally, his father stood. His voice was steady, but fire burned beneath every word. "My boy is not a disgrace. He is not a problem. He is a young man who worked hard, who loved deeply, who dared to be honest. If that's a crime in this town, then the shame isn't on him, it's on you." Applause erupted from half the room, boos from the other. The board looked rattled, caught between worlds. Then, unexpectedly, Mateo stood. His knees trembled, his hands shook, but his voice carried. "I was the one he kissed, and I wanted it. I wanted him. I still do. And if you punish him, then punish me too. Because we're not wrong. We're just in love." The room froze. Gasps echoed. Parents hissed, students whispered, reporters scribbled furiously. Darius's chest tightened, pride and fear colliding in his veins. Mateo had chosen. In front of everyone, he had chosen. The board called for silence. They retreated to deliberate. Minutes stretched into eternity. Finally, they returned. The board has decided, the chair announced, that while the events of the past weeks have been disruptive, there is no evidence of misconduct. Darius Johnson remains eligible to play. The room erupted. Cheers, shouts, chaos. But all Darius could see was Mateo, standing tall despite the storm, his eyes locked on him. For the first time in weeks, he felt something powerful surge inside him. Not just survival. Victory. The news spread faster than fire on dry grass. Darius Johnson was still on the team. By Saturday morning, the entire town was buzzing. Some celebrated the decision, others called it a travesty, but one thing was certain: the next game would not just be basketball. It would be a battlefield, a trial, a stage. For Darius, it was more than that. It was his chance to reclaim what had been stolen: his joy, his pride, his voice. Game day came with skies painted in pale gold, the kind of afternoon where sunlight feels both merciless and forgiving. The stands were packed, not just with fans, but with spectators hungry for a spectacle. Reporters crowded the edges of the court, cameras ready to immortalize whatever happened. Signs waved in the crowd, some reading, "Go Darius," in bold letters, others crueler, reminding him of the hatred that still thrived. When he stepped onto the court, a wave of sound hit him. Cheers and boos clashed in a storm. He held his head high, even as his stomach churned. His teammates glanced at him, some with support, some with resentment. It didn't matter. He was here. The first whistle blew. The game began. From the start, it was brutal. The opposing team targeted him, shoving harder, fouling rougher, testing his endurance. Every time he touched the ball, the crowd erupted, half cheering, half jeering. But Darius refused to falter. He moved with purpose, every dribble an act of defiance, every shot a declaration that he belonged. By halftime, Lincoln High was down by 10. The locker room was tense, sweat dripping, silence heavy. Coach Miller paced, barking strategies, but his eyes kept darting toward Darius. Finally, Darius spoke. "Look, I know some of you don't want me here. I know some of you think I ruined everything. But this team doesn't win without me, and I don't win without you. You don't have to like me. You don't have to agree with me. But right now, out there, we're either brothers or we're nothing. So what's it gonna be?" The room was quiet. Jamal stared at him, jaw tight. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Let's win this." The second half was war. Darius played like his heart was on fire. Every rebound, every shot, every sprint was fueled by weeks of pain and defiance. Mateo, benched but watching from the sideline, cheered louder than anyone. His voice cut through the noise, reaching Darius like a lifeline. With 30 seconds left, the score was tied. The gym pulsed with tension, the crowd a living beast holding its breath. The ball found Darius's hands. Time slowed. He dribbled past one defender, then another. 10 seconds. He rose for the shot, the world suspended in golden light. The ball soared, spinning, gliding. For a heartbeat, silence. Then swish. The net sang. The crowd exploded. Lincoln High had won. Darius fell to his knees, overcome. Teammates rushed him, some out of joy, some still conflicted, but the energy was undeniable. For that moment, victory was bigger than division. But the true victory came after. As the crowd roared, as cameras flashed, as reporters swarmed, Darius turned toward the bleachers. Mateo was standing, tears in his eyes, pride radiating from him like sunlight. And then, without hesitation, Mateo ran onto the court. In front of everyone, he grabbed Darius's hand. Gasps rippled through the crowd, but neither boy let go. Darius lifted their joined hands high, as if declaring to the world, "This is love. This is strength. This is me." The boos came, yes. The whispers too. But so did the cheers, louder, stronger than before. A chant began, Darius, Darius, and for the first time in weeks, he felt the gym love him again. Not all of it, not all of them, but enough. After the game, reporters swarmed him. "How does it feel to win? What do you say to the people who disapprove?" Darius met their cameras head on. "Basketball is about heart. Life is about heart, and I'm not ashamed of mine." That night, father and son sat on the porch again, the stars scattered like witnesses above. His father's eyes glistened, though he pretended otherwise. Your mama would have been proud, he said quietly. Darius leaned against him, the weight of weeks lifting at last. You think so? I know so, his father said, voice steady. And I'm damn proud too. For a while, they just sat in silence, the night cool and forgiving. Then his father chuckled softly. You know, son, you may not have just saved your own dream. You may have lit a fire for a lot of kids in this town who thought they had to stay quiet. Darius thought of the message on his phone, of the kid who said he gave them hope. He thought of Mateo's trembling voice in the auditorium, his hand now steady in Darius's own. He thought of every moment of pain that had led to this. The road ahead was still uncertain. Prejudice didn't vanish overnight. Tomorrow, there would still be whispers, still be glares, still be battles to fight. But tonight, under the stars, he felt something he hadn't felt in weeks. Peace and hope, because he knew now was not alone, and he never would be again. Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe to get notifications about next videos.